My name is Tom Wojciechowski. I'm with UW Extension, Ashland County. I'm also on the WIN board. I've been serving as secretary this past year, and I think I've been on the board for about 7 years. So we're going to go into a panel presentation here, and then we're going to have a break. So hope you can hang on for a minute. If you absolutely can't, bathrooms are out and to the right, and coffee's across the hall. But we're going to go right into this session, and then we'll have a break after that for some time to network, refresh your coffee, etc. I've got a few folks here with me today. We're going to talk about local agriculture and local food. And Alan Spotty Filipchuk?
Close enough, yeah.
With a name like mine, Wojciechowski, I should be a little better at that, but I'm challenged. Alan is with the Schwamgen Food Co-op, and he has been working a lot with their local purchasing and did some of the connections with institutional purchasing that the co-op was helping with. He's going to talk to us a bit about what they're doing with regard to local food and tell us a little bit of some of the exciting plans that the co-op has in mind for this coming year. Kelly Westland, I think she might fit in that lifestyle entrepreneur category, perhaps in a couple of the others. Kelly does consulting work in the area. She also is working with a local CSA, a Community Supported Agriculture group, and also has been coordinating some of the local harvest dinners, if any of you have been fortunate enough to go to those. And on the end is Jason Fischbach. Jason is my colleague with UW Extension. He's our agriculture agent for both Ashland and Bayfield counties. I'm going to set the stage, then each of us are going to give a little bit of an overview of some of the things we're working on, and we're going to try to save about 15 or 20 minutes for your questions. So start thinking about some of those questions as things come up. I think in this area we've realized that local food, local agriculture is kind of a hot issue. I think it's starting to catch on around the country as well. This is something I pulled off of an email newsletter that came in just this week. And this group, the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, has realized that community interest in local food systems has never been higher. It's something that's getting hot around the country. And this also just came across my email this week, and I think it shows that some of the bigger players are getting the word that local food is hot. Roundy's has decided that they're making a splash into the Wisconsin-grown local food market. This ran in the Milwaukee Sentinel Journal this week. So they're trying to step into this area. So when we talk about local foods, we get a lot of different questions, and a lot of people view it in different ways. We've been having a discussion for about the past year and a half in the region that I've been facilitating with a group of people interested in local food. And we've had people involved in that, from people sitting at the table to local growers and farmers. We've also had people from institutional purchasing. Northland College has made a commitment to about 20% of their food for their cafeteria to come from local sources. The school systems are also involved in that. So we've been having discussions with those folks, but also how the heck do you get the food from the farmer to a central location, to the institutional buyers, or the grocery stores, etc. And there's a whole lot of opportunity here, perhaps, and a lot of bottlenecks yet in the system. So we're going to talk a bit about those. A few of the questions: how do you define local? Some folks say, well, from our county or our township. And other people say 50, 75, 100, 250 miles perhaps. Depends on who you're talking to and also what products you're talking about. Can we feed ourselves in this region? My next slide is going to show a little bit of research that's been done on that. Do we have enough land to grow the food that we would need if we tried to feed ourselves in this region? That's also covered on the next slide. I think what we're real interested in here today is what would a local food system mean for our economy, health, the environment, for our Western Lake Superior districts, and for jobs in the area. And then what role does technology play in this, and what role might it play in the expansion of this local food economy? Some researchers from UMD partnered with a farmer, David Amos, and did a study about just those couple questions from the previous slide. Could we feed ourselves in this region? What would it take? Is there enough land? Do we have enough people? They did a series of surveys. They looked at GIS data for mapping and farm locations and sort of abandoned farm locations and fields, and just did a really close look at all of that. This was a question actually under Rob's talk. Someone asked, will we be able to get a hold of these PowerPoints? I think Dave will try to put all of the PowerPoints on our website. So if you'd like to find this study, the web link will be there and you'll be able to find that. So these folks did this study and they came up with a whole bunch of conclusions. You can read a couple of those. I really wanted to point out one, the one that's kind of larger there. In the region, and you'll notice it's northeastern Minnesota and 7 counties northwestern Wisconsin. In the region, people in this region spend about $1.26 billion per year on food. I used their method of calculating and I figured that that is about 84 million for just Ashland and Bayfield counties. In their report, they talk about how much of that comes locally, and I think it's between 5 and 7%. They talk about how much of that goes to the farmer and how much of that goes to people who are transporting it, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if you look at 2.6 billion in this region, there's some potential. One of the challenges is that last bullet, and it said the average net farm income in the region was $3,417. Kind of hard to make a living on that. So there's some challenges. There's a huge potential market. There's some real challenges to making it profitable and attractive for new entrepreneurs in this field. Their bottom line was, it seems to be a very interesting opportunity. I like this last line. It speaks to the lifestyle entrepreneurs, I think, that Rob was talking about. The fact is, farming at present in the region requires dedicated idealism to a way of life. I see one of our local farmers in here, and I think that fits pretty well. Last slide for you. Again, came across my desk in the last week or two. There's apparently a TV program on one of the cable networks, Farm Kings, and they are trying to make farming cool again. So you see the characters in the picture there, they're the stars apparently. And the caption on the top, if you can see it, is it's been 50 years since we've had a popular television show about farming, Green Acres. And some of us around the room probably remember Green Acres. It wasn't a very attractive show, I think, if you were thinking about becoming a farmer. It was a comedy, and it was a laughable comedy, but it wasn't something that was going to say, you know, I really want to become a farmer like that. This apparently is an attempt to say farming can be cool again, it can be a lifestyle choice, it can also be an entrepreneurial choice for people. So first up, Alan, if you would, I don't know if you'd like to speak from here or...
Sure. This is good.
And, why don't you give it a try and see how it's working?
Test.
Yes. Okay, this is Alan from the co-op.
Hi everybody. My name is Alan Spuddy. Good to see some familiar faces in the crowd. I grew up in this area and actually spent a good chunk of time moving around the country, working on farms, working in food co-ops, and so that's part of my background. So I work for Schwelmingen Food Co-op. My official title is Local Food Projects Coordinator, which is kind of a job I invented and surprisingly has sustained for as long as it has. And I work on a variety of things related to local foods. So there's our store. The food co-op was founded in about 1977 and has been in the current location for about 20-25 years. And we're a small grocery store in Ashland. We've been supporting local food in a purchasing sense since the early 1980s, buying berries from Bayfield and some of the first locally available produce in the grocery store setting happened in the early 90s. So we currently purchase a lot of local food. Yeah, there we go. We're let's use a pun here, we're a perennial purchaser of local food. There's some asparagus from the local farmer how many of you are looking at the price and it's like, that's a lot. But it's actually some good asparagus there. So let's see, there's some value-added products that we sell. Jams, all departments, frozen, refrigerated, dry goods, bulk, produce, of course. We have available in local foods. And yes, next slide. This is interesting. So this is a product, drinkable yogurt, that has come onto the market. It came out about a year and a half ago. It's from Springbrook Dairy down by Hayward. And this particular product is notable for the co-op because Teresa, you can see that little cartoon, she actually kind of looks like that in real life. She has that thing on her head. She took out a micro loan from the co-op. We give out micro loans. We started the program in 2008, and they're interest-free loans that typically have anywhere from a 1-year payback to a 3-year payback. And she took out a loan to actually buy those bottles and the caps. And that seems kind of trivial, but it's quite expensive to buy pallets and pallets of glass bottles, and even those little plastic caps really add up. So that's kind of a good example of she took out a loan, made the product, and boom, it's on our shelves in the store. So that's one there. And I'm sure some people are curious about the current state of expansion. So we bought this building on the corner of Main Street and Chapel Avenue in downtown Ashland, 700 West Chapel, which is currently Bob's Factory Outlet, a giant furniture store. It's this huge old building. The co-op bought it about coming up on 3 years now. We've owned it, and we've been leasing it to the furniture folks. Anybody who's been in downtown Ashland has probably noticed these giant signs that say, "Lost our lease," and "Your loss, our gain." They're really trying to milk that because they're actually going to be in there until Thanksgiving. And this winter we're going to start construction of our new store, which is going to double our square footage. It's, if you can see that one-story portion that's on the western side of the lot, that is going to be our retail store. And we'll have expanded. I think the produce section will be about 3 times as big. There's going to be fresh meats. There's going to be a lot more opportunity for local foods. Now we just need the food to fill that space.
Great, thank you, Al. I have to do a quick segue on the slides. Kelly, next. Do you want to maybe give an intro while I...
Sure.
And...
Oh, thank you. So I'm Kelly Westland, and going back to Rob's talk, I do fall into a couple of those different categories. I'm one of these people that kind of created my own employment in order to get paid to do the projects that are near and dear to my heart. And a lot of those projects revolve around local food issues. And so that was a good segue from Alan actually talking about the need for more local food in the region. We have the space, we have the demand, we just need the supply. And I've been working with Jason Kidman actually on the Bayfield Regional Food Producers Cooperative. It's an organization of 18 local farms and other food producers, so it also includes boating fisheries, whitewater winery, some other things in addition to a lot of our meat, fruit, and veggie producers. We've also recently, in the last year or two, added 2 cheesemakers, so we can offer a whole range of products. And within the Food Producers Cooperative, we have a couple of different programs that we do. One is the Lake Superior CSA, and it's kind of the behemoth right now. I would say that it's kind of taken on a much bigger role in the co-op's activities. We started with doing, for those of you who aren't familiar with community-supported agriculture, essentially you're buying a share in the production of the farm. So you pay in the beginning of the year, and the farmers can take that money and invest it in planting or doing whatever they need to do to ensure their harvest. And then once things start to get ready for harvest, you get a box every week or every other week or something with local food in it. And so it's always kind of a surprise. You have to be a little bit adventurous to appreciate it. I think you'll see vegetables that you probably have never picked for yourself at the grocery store. But we started with shares in Duluth and Superior. And just because the market was bigger there, we didn't want to compete with folks who are already doing this sort of thing here in this region. And something that our co-op was able to do differently than other groups, because we have so many different members, was that you could sign up for 1 share, and for 11 months we would provide meat, fruit, vegetables, cheese, bread, some of these other things depending on which shares you got. But you could essentially get what we call it the whole diet share. If you get our value-added products like jams and jellies and pesto and honey and stuff, then it becomes the whole shebang. So that, I think the first time the CSA was operating was in 2010. And since 2010, and if you include this year's season, we have reached a point where we are at, 10 times the revenue within the year for the CSA. So it's been doing very, very well. And at this point, it's just a matter of, look, we've had to shut down sales because we can't keep up with the demand for these products. The Bayfield Shores Harvest Trail has kind of taken on two different, it used to be an annual event where you could come and tour farms, meet the producers, see where the food comes from, and then we would do a big Harvest Trail dinner, which is the fall festival where it's all local food, and it's kind of this sit-down fancy-schmancy thing where we pair each course with a South Shore Brewery beer and a White Winter Winery wine, and then, it's kind of a fun evening. It has since kind of evolved. We have our events section, which is a big barbecue that happens in Bayfield, and then this October, it used to be October dinner, the fall dinner that happens later, but now it's also part of our wholesale efforts, which is relatively new, and we've been reaching out to markets down toward Stevens Point area and then back around heading toward Eau Claire, but that's just now starting to kind of get its feet underneath it. And then South Shore Meats is the collaboration between all of our meat producers that has kind of its own separate label. So if you wanted to just order a box of meat, then these are the folks that are kind of sharing the expenses of packaging and things like that. This year, because of the increase in production and the volume that we're moving, we actually worked with Bayfield County to get one of the buildings that's on the old agricultural research station, the farm, west of Ashland. And this used to be a machine shed. And I think to this point we've invested about $10,000 in upgrading the electrical components in the building, but installing big walk-in coolers and freezers. We've got these really cool, the roller conveyor belt things that help a lot with packing. So you'll see we've got, 5 or 6 people in there. They come in on Tuesdays and pack the meat. On Wednesday mornings we pack the veggies. And then we load the van. And this week we sent, I think, over 250 boxes of goods, products grown in this region by our producers to Duluth and Superior. So it's pretty exciting that it's growing the way that it is. This is just a feel for the barbecue, and I just want to talk about some of the economic impacts of local food. For example, you'll see in the bottom corner picture there, this was at Blue Vista Farm up in Bayfield, and we fed about 400 people that day. A lot of those people came and picked berries and spent money, and they stayed in local hotels or campgrounds, and a lot of that funding comes right back into our local communities, and it stays here for a while. To the left, you'll see Beau Boulanger of South Shore Brewery and John Dale from Highland Valley Farm. Highland Valley Farm, if you don't know, grows blueberries, and they have entered into a partnership with South Shore Brewery to make this Highlander blueberry wheat beer. So it was a big hit at the barbecue, and it's something that they're bottling and now selling through the brewery and their distribution network. And yeah, I'll just say that it's also an impact for our farmers. We may not make a lot of money off the event, but we buy all of our products from our producers, so they're at least seeing that much income, and then it's a good marketing opportunity for the rest of our products. And then the Harvest Trail dinner, it's kind of the same thing. This one we work usually with area chefs, so they also get some promotional work done for their businesses, and yeah, we usually do it in a cool and unique location. This year it'll be in the barn at Freehand's Farm. This year it was in a greenhouse, as you'll see there. So that's another one of those. If I'm focusing on the idea of this conference, the technology, some of the things that we use to help make this thing run. We have a couple Facebook pages where we do regular updates. We'll share recipes for things that are in the boxes. We'll take pictures and just keep people, posted on what we're doing. And it's really easy to link that to your Facebook so that you at least have an online presence. I have active Facebook pages there because nothing is worse than a Facebook page that never ever gets updated. So if you're going to have one, at least take the time, once a week even, to post something. As far as building the websites themselves, Weebly is sort of my new favorite thing. I know there are a lot of options out there, but if you're in a position where you need to do an inexpensive and attractive looking website and it needs to be user friendly, it's a really great program to consider. Small Farm Central is something that's more specific to managing a CSA. It's something we're looking at now, but we haven't jumped in with both feet. It's a program that sets it up so that your farmers can basically log in and say, here's what I have available. Your customers can log in and say, here are the shares that I want. And it'll send you weekly pick lists saying this many people want this many people want that, and it tells you how to organize it, and it's something that a lot of folks use. But it's also something that is very similar to a lot of web-based programs for online food hubs. So I know that the co-op has been part of, or at least for a little while, was coordinating where like Northland College would contact and say, hey, we need 300 pounds of zucchini, and the co-op would find a way to find 300 pounds of zucchini in the region. And there are a lot of web-based utilities that can help us do that. And then Dropbox.com, just when you have a lot of people working together, it's a super convenient, cloud-based way to share information. So I guess those are some of the tech options that I would suggest using if you're looking at doing any of this kind of stuff. That's all I've got, unless anybody has any questions about that stuff. But
I think we'll hold questions until the end.
Right.
Can I get into it? So, Jason, if you want to take over and I'll get that show up. I turned mine off. That far end light is really lively. Hey,
Turn it off.
do you want the handheld?
I think I'll just talk and try to project as well as I can. So I started with UW Extension in 2006. We can increase that a little bit. So the reality that I walked into is that if you look at all the agricultural statistics, if you look at the culture, if you look at the thinking of decision makers, you see who's on the county boards, you see who's on the town boards, agriculture's been on the decline. Okay? So my job is sort of my personal mission, if you will, has been to do what I can to revitalize the agricultural economy in the region, because it can have a big impact, both culturally and economically. And the path that I've chosen is to find those entrepreneurs, those folks that have the skills, that have the energy, that have the interest, that have the open mind and willingness to learn, and have the potential to grow businesses that are going to drive the agricultural economy. And so what I wanted to do with the talk today is talk just real briefly about a number of projects, kind of give you a snapshot of what's happening, both in terms of the work we're doing and the technology that's emerging to help them for existing operations, to help make them better. And then I also want to talk about some new projects, because part of my goal has been working with extensions, not only to find those entrepreneurs and tweak these systems that are in existence now, but is to find new crop opportunities, things that our region can excel at and produce a product that we can do. So we don't always have to be, the concept here is we're trying to be corn and bean farmers perhaps, but we don't grow corn and beans here. We will always be outcompeted by folks in the Corn Belt. So we need to find crops and opportunities that are unique to this region so that we can be successful, right? We grow forages and dairy very well. That's one thing we can do. So I always like Dorothy Lang's photos because it's a reminder to all of us, I think, is that we're really not that far away from a very different lifestyle. Not too long ago, we were an agrarian country, and about this time of year, we all looked about like this. Tired, bedraggled. We didn't live very long. Look at the guy's hands, right? And so what's gotten us away from that? What allows us to go to conferences like this and look healthy and well-rested and well-fed is agricultural research, education, entrepreneurship. And I think it's important that we remember that, because our interaction with food for the most part consists of what? We're happy to eat those of us that are spoiled. We're happy to eat whatever our spouse puts in front of us that night. And the other part is we just complain about the food bill, right? The grocery bill. Well, we've got to remember that the investments in these things is what keeps us from having to work as hard as we have in the past. Right? So let's look at some technology that's being used to improve existing crops and systems. One is the ability to more rapidly develop improved breeds, improved genetics, right? So this is, I won't go into the details, but progeny testing. So here's a bull, and we know a lot about its offspring. So much so that we can tell you what to expect if you use semen from this bull, what your offspring might be in your herds, right? So you can custom order a bull these days to rapidly improve the genetics of your beef animals. And this actually makes a big difference for beef producers in our region, because instead of sending out calves and making a small amount of money, if at all, we can sell out finished steers and sell meat direct to customers and make a whole lot more money. But to do that, we've got to find the genetics that can produce a well-marbled steak or ground beef that customers are used to without using grains. So can you finish them? We also see this with marker-assisted selection. If we're going to develop hazelnuts, for example, that I'll talk about in a bit, we can use our genetic tools and genomics to more rapidly identify the plants that are superior or have the traits that we want, and so we can make rapid improvement. Whereas before, it was a much slower process. Low-cost plasticulture. So all this is some metal framing with a piece of plastic over the top. And it's changing the way we grow vegetables in the region, and it's creating opportunities because of season extension. So this is actually at my place. If you look out there, the grass is just barely starting to green, which this year was what, June 1st or something? Well, look, I'm already harvesting beets and kale, and I've got peppers in the ground, and there's leeks started over here, and I actually already pulled out a spinach crop, okay? Most people haven't even tilled the garden yet outside. So, and it's very low cost structure. So if you're a vegetable producer in the region, this is the technology they're all going to. Low cost plastic culture. So here's winter production in a greenhouse with no added heat. This is spinach that's being harvested and grown with no added heat in the high tunnel. So you can harvest and eat spinach in December, January, February. Okay? So we've got an ability to produce food over a much longer season than we used to. We also have newer high-value fruit crops. This is a planting up in Bayfield of Marquette. The University of Minnesota has developed some cold-hardy winter grape varieties that make excellent wines. And people come to Bayfield and say, "What? There aren't any wineries? What's going on? I was just in Michigan, and there's wineries everywhere." Well, we're getting closer. There are there's a winery in our river, and now we've got a couple up in Bayfield. And these newer high-value crops are creating opportunities, and that's why we're seeing growth in the fruit production in Bayfield. Picture doesn't show up, but we're starting to see some advances in manure management. And those of you that live south of town, you have familiarity with manure when the dairy producers start spreading it on the field, right? And so the problem has been these tankers. When they come off the factory showroom line, they're already overweight. They can't be driven on the roads. And so, for the most part, people turn a blind eye to it. The last couple of years, that changed. We had a young state patrol officer working Highway 112 and pulled everybody over. This happened across the state. So we've got to figure out a better way to haul the manure, right? We also know that this broadcasts it on the ground, so it tends to run off, and the neighbors get a little cranky when you spread manure, right? They don't like the smell of it. It costs a lot of diesel fuel to pull these things across the field. The heavy things rip up the roads to towns in the state, and taxpayers don't like them. It also compacts the fields, so it's really not good for anything, but you got to get rid of that manure somehow. So we're looking at temporary pipelines instead of tankers. So this is something that you might lay out for up to 4 miles. The technology, it's cost effective to pump manure. And so what you'll see is that one end of the hose hooked up to the manure pits, and the other end will be hooked up to a tractor that's got the hose connected to it and injects the manure right in the ground. So it goes in the ground instead of on the ground, so it doesn't run off. It goes in the ground under the soil so it doesn't stink, and you don't have the tankers running down the roads. So it's a great opportunity, but we've got some challenges to figure out the best routes for laying these pipelines and things. But it's going to create opportunities, especially if the dairy herds south of Ashland want to expand. They're going to have to deal more effectively with manure spreading, both from an economic standpoint and an environmental standpoint. We've seen advances in pest management, and this is a big issue. One, from a consumer acceptance, they want to know more and more about what's being applied to their foods and what they're feeding to their kids, right? So they want to know what pesticides are used. More importantly is that the older generation maybe had more tolerance for these kinds of chemicals that were used, okay? I get calls all the time from folks that have an interest in growing fruit. And I start talking to them about pest management, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth, I don't want to spray it. I don't want to be exposed to chemicals, right? Which is totally legitimate and a concern that they should have. Well, we're starting to see some advances in pest management where the toxicity of their spray programs can go way down, and that makes it more palatable to young folks that want to grow fruit that otherwise have zero tolerance for exposing themselves to chemicals. So here's an example. This is a codling moth, the worm in the apple. It's a pest that will be in apples unless you do something about it. And well, it turns out that codling moths the female puts out a mating pheromone, and the males find that pheromone, and that's how they find the females. So we figured out what that pheromone, researchers figured out what that pheromone is. They put it in these little emitters, and you hang those emitters out in the orchard. And now what you've got is 400 fake females. And the males can't find the real females, right? So they can't mate, so there's no eggs. Sounds like a good thing for junior high. It's an example of biological control, so we're using much more targeted pesticides to a specific stage of the life cycle, or a pesticide that isn't really killing anything, right? Versus the old method was nerve poisons developed for war. In World War II, these were broad-spectrum insecticides you'd spray every 2 weeks and you'd kill everything, right? Well, consumers worry about exposure to pesticides, but they really have nothing to worry about. It's the producers who have come into contact with it. They need to be worried about it. So this is creating a lot of opportunities for not only selling their fruit, but also producing it. Managed intensive grazing. There was, a couple of years ago, there was an elected official somewhere in the county that said, made a comment that I just about lost it. Normally I'm a pretty calm person. They said, oh, we know everything we need to know about grazing. We've known it forever. Grazing's easy. If only the producers that are trying to figure this out are there. But what we're seeing is some changes. So the old school grazing was based on the open range model. You fence in the back 4, you let the cows out. They trample half the forage, they eat a third of it, or whatever it is, and it's totally inefficient. So what we've gone is not high technology, which is maybe what we're using for some other areas of agriculture, but actually looking at some very low-tech management-based alternatives where you bunch up the livestock and you manage them so you move them once, twice, maybe 3 times a day, so that every bite they take is the highest possible quality forage. And they're using all of that forage across the pasture instead of trampling half of it or eating just the best parts and leaving the rest of it. And so you get much more higher productivity off the same acres. And what we're seeing is that the grazers that are doing this, combined with the right genetics, can really make a go of it in the beef industry. And if a region that we can grow forage as well because of the soils and climate, if we can maximize the productivity for these beef animals, then perhaps we can see some significant gains, particularly if grain-fed beef becomes less and less sustainable given the cost of corn or the cost of inputs to raise the corn and feed those cows. And if you as a consumer can't tell the difference between grain-fed or grass-fed, what do you care, right? Okay, so just briefly, I'm going to mention some new crop systems, and if I whet your appetite, and hopefully I do, I've got some brochures for an event that'll go into depth on each of these that I'm going to talk about. It's on Thursday, August 22nd, so I'll leave these in the front. Okay, so the challenge of the previous generations, maybe the previous to me, was to develop a dependable food supply, right? Famine was a real issue. If the grass, at home we read the Little House on the Prairie stories, and on the banks of Plum Creek, Pa planted his wheat, and the plague of locusts came and ate it all, right, instead of moving to town. Anyway, that was the challenge not too long ago, is to develop a dependable food supply. And we've more or less done that, right? As long as you have enough money to buy it, you can reasonably expect to go to the grocery store any given day and buy food that you need. So much so that we all take it for granted. The challenge of my generation and the ones after me would be, okay, we can grow a dependable food supply, but now what we're talking about is not only food, but also energy. And we have to deal with the water issue. We can't deplete the aquifers, and we can't pollute groundwater with atrazine, and we can't load up the water with phosphorus or nitrogen. Okay? We need all 3 of those things for 9 billion people. Not just 6 or 7 billion people, but 9 billion. That's the challenge going forward. Okay? So and what we're seeing is perhaps a split in the community the way we talk about this issue. One is you've got sort of preservationism, which it's all about native landscapes, native plants and shrubs, and that's it, and agriculture is bad and everything, right? If you're going to mess with my forest or my prairie, you're bad. Then you've got the other side that says, we're going to feed the world, fence row to fence row, corn and beans from this corner to this corner, Whatever happens, we've got money to make, let's go, okay? Well, that's not really reasonable either. So perhaps there's this middle ground, which says, why can't we have both? Why can't we have agricultural productivity and clean water and wildlife habitat and economic opportunity? There's no reason why we can't. But to get there, we're going to have a little bit different systems, and we're likely going to need a different set of crops that we're used to, okay? Now, what that means is opportunity for somebody to develop those crops, develop those systems, and profit from them. So here's one example. This is an integrated landscape that you might look at that's got this alley cropping concept. You've got woody perennials out there, nut crops, you've got fruit crops, integrated with pastures, livestock, corn and beans. You've got annual row crops, right? So what I want to do in the next couple of slides is show some examples of crops that we can develop in our region from species that are native to our region that might fit this kind of a system. So the first is hazelnuts. I think most of you have probably at one time or another heard me talk about this, but I think it's interesting. And we'll go into much more depth at our meeting, actually tour some plantings. But it's a perennial oil seed, right? So oil seeds are important for one, a biofuel source, but for what we eat and feed cattle. Soybeans are our primary oilseed crop, sunflowers, canola, whatever else it is. It's crucial to our agriculture and our diets. We don't have a perennial oilseed crop. If we had a perennial crop that we just plant once, maybe every 5 years or longer, and go out and harvest the protein and the oils that we need, the lipids off that agriculture, we can make some big improvements in our systems. And hazelnuts is a contender. Well, it turns out that hazelnut is native to our region, and perhaps we are in the epicenter of the genetic diversity of American hazelnut, such that with a little bit of plant breeding and selection, we can find plants that are uniquely adapted to our region, and we can be the leaders in this crop. It's an exciting one because of the multiple uses. One, value-added products, spreadable nut butters, and oil. Raw kernels, of course, just for fresh eating or baking or further processing. And this is the one that's exciting. Anyone know your lipid chemistry, C18-1? That's oleic acid. That's the fatty acid that's in olive oil that makes it so healthy. Oleic acid is a monounsaturated fatty acid that makes fantastic biofuel, okay, with low cloud points and everything else that we want. There's nothing higher than American hazelnut in oleic acid. It's 80%, upwards of 80% oleic acid, okay? UW Superior researchers have been doing some of this work for us, and they're excited about it. So we've got two populations to choose from where we're at right now, and I want to, this is sort of a Northport idea, is that what we've got are opportunities to develop some cultivars that will work for farms in our region. Then we need someone sort of to scale it up. So that's kind of where we're at, is we've got the research component in place. In a few short years, we will have these first selections available for scale up. But that's sort of where I work up to and someone else takes over, and that means entrepreneurs that are willing to do this. So we've got two pools. One are these European and American crosses, which improves the nut size of the American hazelnut. Most of you have ever seen it in the woods. They're really small with thick shells. Okay? By adding in some European genetics, you get a little bit bigger nut. The other one is all of these native populations along the sand belt up in northwest Wisconsin, over in Marinette County, down by Stevens Point. So what we've done is taken the best of the best from those two populations, and to make sure, again, that our region is the one that's going to benefit, is we've established this Bayfield germplasm trial. We'll start seeing some yields next year. And I should say that the Schwamigan Food Co-op at the time owned this parcel and was supportive in getting this project established there. We've since established a second planting to see what we can find for clay soils down at the Northern Great Lakes Visitor Center, and Jason's here with their center. So hopefully from those trials we'll learn more about what will work. Anyone driven by the ag station recently and seen all that woody biomass out in the field, kind of the corner of 137 at the triangle there? This is hybrid willow and what some folks would call woodgrass. And the idea here is that this is a high-yielding, short-rotation woody biomass feedstock that in the day when natural gas was much more expensive, it would probably make sense where you could harvest this off, send it over to the power plant, burn it. Okay? Is it a cost-competitive feedstock right now with natural gas? Probably not. But the part that's exciting is the work that's being done in the state laboratories where they're trying to figure out what to do with the lignin, hemicellulose, and cellulose and turn it into other bioindustrial products. So I'm more in the business of feedstock supply chain production, and someone else can figure out, match what to do with it. But Norcorp might be interested in the product, right? So here's what it looks like after 3 years. This stuff grows. And then you harvest it in the winter, and you don't need much for specialized equipment. Anyone recognize this? Same thing you harvest corn with. All it's got is a modified head on it. So you just run down the winter so you don't rut up the soil, you don't compact it, and you can harvest wood chips. So we are doing those trials to figure out which cultivars will perform the best and what our yields were, so we can put together some enterprise budgets for potential growers. And then the last slide here, this is again out of UW Superior, the work that they've done. They looked at all of the native plants in the region to see what they can produce for oils and look at the properties of those oils for making aviation fuel. Make aviation fuel, you've got to have very low cloud points so that they can go at high altitudes and it doesn't gel up, okay? Well, this thing blew everything out of the water. This is high bush cranberry. It grows native in the woods, primarily on wetter soils. This is the green fruit right now. I just took this picture the other day. It'll turn red. You harvest the seeds, squeeze the oil out of it, and ideally you make biofuel out of it. The other thing that they found is that their properties, and I don't know exactly what it is, but they're highly antiviral. So there's folks at UW Oshkosh looking at it as in a pharmaceutical property. So we've worked with those guys to establish some high bush cranberry trials. There's one at the Ag Station. Hopefully we'll have 2 more going in next year if the funding comes through. And again, same thing. We'll generate the production information, and then we need the entrepreneurs to scale it up and grow it and see if they can make money doing so. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a snapshot of some work that we're doing, technology to help existing producers, and then some new crops that we're trying to get the pipeline going that we might see. And this is I'm just scratching the surface. Notice I didn't talk aquaponics or aquaculture. It's another technology that has potential in the region. So it's an exciting time in agriculture for sure, and it's something that we should not be ignoring because, and I noticed it wasn't on the list of resources that we have in the region, but it is. It's something that we should really be thinking at. We've got a large pool of very smart entrepreneurs working in the businesses and having a lot of success. So, I think that's it.
Thank you. I think we'll open it up to questions. And if you don't have some, I've got some, but let's see who's got some out in the audience. Julia.
Jason, where are those Irish cranberries? Where are they?
The trial planting?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's by the Willow on 137 within that fenced area. When you drive by. Yeah, we'll take a tour of it on that field day on the 22nd.
Okay.
It's not much to see yet. We just installed them last year, so it'll be a couple of years.
Yes.
A question for Jason. Where can you buy the biological control approach of the tabs or whatever you put on fruit trees and others rather than using chemicals?
Yeah, right, the mating disruption. Yeah, you can buy those through some online retailers. I can give you the specifics, but it doesn't work on sort of backyard scenarios because if the females mate over here outside that pheromone area, they're already mated, and so then they'll lay their eggs. You got to do it on a larger scale so that none of the females mate.
Are you or the extension or anyone else doing anything to help protect the bees or bee culture in our region?
So that kind of,
with that?
yeah, that kind of work is one of the outcomes is to reduce the use of broad spectrum pesticide bees. So now they can control the pests without spraying with chemicals that kill bees. That's one big improvement. But also increasing wildlife habitat, continuous production of flowers on a landscape, so they've got something to eat.
There are CSA shares available, or did you say that was kind of that capacity?
We're sold out for this year, but typically what happens, you actually do have to get in kind of early. So if you start signing up, we start posting things in January or February, and then the first shares go out in May. And then it's for an 11-month thing. There are some things still available now, things like meat, cheese, bread, and some of our other stuff, but it's on the website if you're interested in taking a look.
Yes.
I just have a comment. I get the CSA, I get the whole that I should.
No. I thought your name was related.
Coming to the Harvest Trail dinner, I'm really excited. It's actually on my birthday. And there's a lot of us. I live in Duluth. I actually get to pick
things about 2 years ago and some of the discussions we were having was how to increase demand so that it was economical for people to get into the business. I think we've changed completely now to where we need more farmers. We need more growers because we're not meeting the demand right now.
We
Comments
have
on that?
a serious supply problem,
Right.
which is a great problem to have.
I've got a comment. Actually, this kind of echoes back to the keynote address. I think it's almost more valuable to invest in the folks who are already doing it and have really established themselves as good farmers and people who are in it for the long haul. I think that should be the primary focus, while still encouraging new folks to come into the fold.
So those micro loans that the co-op puts out there that really helps someone gear up to a next level or
Right,
something.
right.
And a number of our producers have actually taken advantage of the microloans in order to expand the growing space that they have, whether it's helping to pay and put in another high tunnel, or even just, what it takes to plant another section. I know that Great Oak has had to expand quite a bit to accommodate, enough vegetables for next year. Yeah, but it's not just, it's an increased demand for the food, but honestly, like, as I'm looking at, the whole supply chain, things like making the boxes, like making the jars that we use for all of our value-added products, things like the quart for the winery, there are a lot of other opportunities that are sort of, I don't know if you call them ripple effects, but other things that need to go into this as well, so.
Yes, Rita.
How do you guys think about the competition with farmers markets? Do you think that as competitors? How do you manage that?
My take is that you've got some tiered markets established, and a farmer's market is a great break-in market for producers because you don't have to show up if you don't want to. No one's really depending on you versus if you've got a contract with a restaurant or a CSA, you better produce that week. Versus farmer's market, if you've got stuff, you show up. So it's kind of a low-risk market. Now what's happened is because of the marketing work that we've done to help growers sell stuff, is all of a sudden there's not enough supply, and so the larger growers have left the farmers market to focus on their other markets. So right now, there's sort of a temporary problem, if you will, because there aren't as many vendors. In farmers markets, you don't get as many customers, right? So, but it's a good problem now. It's an opportunity for some of these smaller growers to step it up. I mean, that's what we're starting to see. That's what we want, right? So I don't see it so much as a competition as sort of tiered markets that each grower is going to have to make a decision in how they choose to market their products.
It's also an opportunity for a lot of our cooperative members that sell only certain products through the CSA or through our organization. They can go to the farmers markets and sell their other products, especially non-food products. A lot of them do that as well.
And I've always thought it's sort of unique that the farmers market is right outside the co-op
Right.
and seems to support each other.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think, I don't see a competition there at all. I think, to be sort of blunt about it, I think in our area, farmers markets are really sort of peripheral. There's not a whole lot of food moving through the farmers markets. It's a good way for folks who kind of have like a hobby farm or a side business to make some extra income, but it's not really a heavy player in the local food system.
Alan,
Yeah.
I should have asked you this ahead to see if you know the answer, to find it. I'll put you on the spot. Do you know approximately how many employees work for the co-op now?
Yeah, but
And what do you anticipate in growth?
Sure. So there's about 25 employees at the co-op now, most of whom are full-time. And in some of the tours, for instance, the Viroqua Food Co-op, when the Alliance for Sustainability, I went along in a delegation there, and the general manager was very forthcoming with information. What we can expect from expansion is, looking at some of these other co-ops, is that within 1 year of expansion, we need to be prepared for a doubling of sales. So right now we're about a $2.5 million store, and we'll be looking at doubling to about $5 million. That of course increases staff by about half in that regard, but most of those will be part-time and more higher turnover, those type of employees. There'll be people like dishwashers and cashiers, whereas a lot of the senior staff will remain in place and transfer.
I always think it's surprising that there's 25 people working for that little store. I think it does have some economic impact.
Right, yeah, slightly different business model than like Walmart, where if you have a question, anybody? You just hear the echo.
I think we started a little bit late, so I think we'll cut the difference in half, and we'll end in about 3 more minutes, and then maybe take our break until 11:30, which will put us just 5 minutes behind our schedule. Yes, Ted?
What's the typical market share of fresh food, direct from producers versus value-added products, and how much potential effort is being invested in looking at value-added products in the region, adding canning or frozen or whatever beyond just fresh? I don't know what the percentage is on fresh versus others, and what market share can we fill in this region?
Jason?
Alan can give some sense of, well, my understanding is that Schwangman Food Co-op sells more value-added local products than fresh produce. And I think the Bayville Regional Food Producers Cooperative is probably half and half, roughly, right now. For sure, there are opportunities for value-added, and we've been successful in getting some funding to help address some of their market development issues, some of the recipe development. Northland College is getting involved to try to develop some infrastructure to support value-added production. So there's, it has to be part of the puzzle simply because the growing season is so short. Alan, I don't know if you've got something.
Yeah, I'd say just from working in the grocery store setting, the big sellers in local are milk, eggs, ground beef, some of these staple items that a lot of people just have in their grocery bag every week. Produce when it's in season, certain produce items like fresh spinach, fresh carrots, things that there's a market difference between getting it locally and getting it from California or Mexico. Those items can sell really well. The value added, say like the dry goods, jams, and that kind of thing, they actually sell pretty slow, but the beauty of them is that they're on the shelf. And they can sell at sort of this incremental rate because they're not highly perishable and they just sell. So it's part of the puzzle for sure.
Right. And I would add that from what I've heard from our producers, a lot of them would prefer to do more of the value-added stuff just because it does extend that season and the shelf life of their products. I know, for example, Highland Valley does blueberries, and we sell 10-pound boxes of fresh blueberries. And I know that they would really appreciate it if I could get more people to buy the frozen ones, just because then they can, stockpile those and be able to do bigger orders at a time and have things kind of, have the fresh ones available for people to kind of pick. So, I think that it's something that more people would like to do, but at this point, they're setting up, commercial kitchens in their homes or on their farms, or there isn't really a good centralized place to do any large-scale processing, which I understand might be in the works for the new building. No.
Not that I know.
Okay. Rumors. Okay.
And maybe before we go, I just also want to point out that to me the most exciting emerging market for local food in the area is the institutional market. Tom mentioned Northland College earlier, and this past school year they really pounded the pavement to get whatever local they could get into the school, and they were able to get somewhere in the vicinity of 15 to 20%. Their goal is to get to 80% of the cafeteria food, which every time anybody hears that number, it's kind of like an eye roller, because there's not even close to that much food even grown in our area, but they're serious about it, so I think we should take that seriously, and that's a very significant amount of food, very significant. So Northland College is a big player, Ashland School District, they're willing to open the pocketbook for local food. WITC has expressed interest in a relatively small scale because they just serve breakfast and lunch for a small group of people, but I think that's an emerging market that can be really good, especially for the farmers who are well established and can guarantee that supply and meet their commitments.
So here's why Northland matters. So they bought, I saw their last school year, they bought just over $100,000 worth of food products from local producers within the 4 county areas, which is important. It's not nothing, but more importantly, what it's forcing producers to do is develop their distribution capability. So if you can serve Northland College efficiently, it's a very small step to serve other institutional markets that are larger. Say to get over to Duluth Superior region and start talking to hospitals and other buyers, or grocery store chains or whatever it is. So that's the important part, is that Northland College is willing to put up with all the BS that's involved with working with producers and trying to figure this out. But because they weren't willing to do that, now they're all set up and ready to go. So ultimately, that's the outcome that we'd like to see, is that an efficient distribution network, ideally grower-owned, so that they can benefit from it. And see then they can possibly really expand into larger revenue streams that can support meaningful farm incomes.
Joe?
That makes me think of the Judy Wick seminar and how she, as a restaurant owner who was using all local and organic, went to her competitors and said, please support these farms because they're worth it and we want them to keep going and to expand. So that sharing of information is how one did it and how successful it was is crucial.
I think we need to wrap up. Leave you with this. I think there's a lot of opportunities for growers and producers, but there's equally as many opportunities or more perhaps for people to help get it from those folks to our plates. And so I'd like the folks in the room to think about where are entrepreneurial opportunities all along that food chain. If anyone is so excited about this, you'd like to join our local food meetings, talk to one of us afterward, and we'll put you on the list and get you invited. What we try to do in those is encourage networking. So folks, oh, you're doing, yeah, I can work with that. And we try to find the bottlenecks and see what we could do with the folks around the room to sort of reduce some of those bottlenecks from getting more food out there. So thank you for your time. Thank you, panel. And we're going to take a break until 11:30 and back in here for another panel.